In this course, we'll develop a full-stack website or a web application using Python. So you may have heard about HTML, you may have heard about CSS, you may have heard about Python. What a full-stack website is it's a website that not only has a front end, not only has the HTML part or the design part, CSS, but it has functionality. It's powered by a language, and in this case, it would be Python. So YouTube, for example, when you go to youtube.com, you have all of these different pictures and images and everything. That's just basic HTML. That's what displays to the user. But behind it all, all the stuff that's buffering and all of the login functionality and saving things in your favorites and watch history and watching later and all that stuff, all of that is running on a language, a more powerful language. Something like Python or something like Ruby. In YouTube's case, it's Python. In Instagram's case, it's Ruby. But the point is that you need to know the back-end languages to really be able to call yourself a web developer today. I mean, you may be a front-end developer, that's fine, but a full-stack web developer is a very good skill set to have. And so we're going to go over everything, including HTML, including CSS, including JavaScript, Ajax, everything that will get you to understand what full stack web development is all about. And then we'll use a framework called a micro framework called Bottle. And with that framework, you can learn the concepts that you can apply to bigger frameworks like Django or Ruby on Rails or whatever language or whatever framework you choose. So let's go ahead and get started. I've shown some code here, and what this is this the code that you will understand by the end of the course. This shows you all of the, so some Ajax there's some CSS, there's a whole mix of languages here, and there's even some SQL. So we'll learn all of these things in this course, and let's go ahead and get started. So let's go out to pythonanywhere.com, and I already have an account, so before I log in, let me just go over the sign up with you. Whatever you create in the beginner account here, you'll need to have your username will be your subdomain. So for example, if I put hello here, then my domain will be hello.pythonanywhere.com. Okay, so I need to make sure that I am very careful with, or I mean, you can always change, create a new site. But when you sign up, do put your name or your user, know that your username will be your subdomain. Put in your email, put in your password. Once you've actually logged in, you'll see something like this. So let me go ahead and log in. And once you're in, oops, maybe I didn't. Log back out and log back in. Okay, so once you're in, you should go to web. You should be able to go to web and then add a new web app. So this is going to be our host for our website, so that we can actually have a live and working website and see how everything works. It reminds you what your domain will be, and if that's okay with you, just go ahead and go to next, and then we're going to choose Bottle and Python 3.6. And give it a few seconds, and you should find that your web app is now ready to go. And if you go to engagecs.pythonanywhere.com or your domain, you should see it say hello from Bottle. So that's good. That means that we have a working website. And so we can go ahead and get started with the HTML side of it. So let's go ahead and just go to an online IDE. Now we can use something like Sublime Text, which is where we can code. And I recommend coding here. First of all, always go to File, Save As, and start an HTML page. So something.html. And when you do that and you go to HTML, it knows that you're trying to do HTML. I just hit Tab after putting the first tag, and I get the HTML structure. So let's just go over this really quick so we make sure that we understand. Even if you've done HTML before, it's good to just understand the basics here. You always have an HTML tag or an element. So a tag is anything that's between the two angle brackets here. And an element is everything between it. So these are defined words. You cannot go ahead and make these words up. You can't say Bob. You can't make a tag called Bob. Or at least not yet. You can't make a tag called Bob and it understands that is an HTML tag. they are predefined tags that, that mean something. So for example, P will be a paragraph, so this is a paragraph. And that between the P, everything between the P tag, the start and the end, will be something called an element. So this is an element, this is an element, and this is a nested element of the HTML element. The three attributes of a tag will be that it has a start and an end. The end has an angle bracket, a forward slash before it, and it always comes in pairs. There are exceptions, but they come in mostly they come in pairs. So we'll go over a few tags little by little. We won't go over all the tags, obviously. This is not about HTML. This is more about getting right straight into Python. But let's just go over the basic HTML, assuming you don't know much about it or you've just dabbled in it. So going back, this is our HTML structure. We won't get into something called a DOM. It's good for you to go off now and research what the DOM is, D-O-M, and this will explain how this whole structure is seen by a computer. But basically, the head is the code in your page that is not usually seen by the user, and the body is what is seen. So let's go ahead and instead of working here, let's go back to Chrome, and let's go to our online compiler, and let's just use this one for now to go ahead and view our results right away. Now you notice they give you a little bit more of a skeleton here, give you a few more tags. This is a language tag. We'll remove this. This is something for mobile devices. We'll remove that, and this is for your external CSS. We'll remove these. So we're back to what we had earlier, and this is our title. So this is always going to be the top of your what displays in the tab. It used to be the actual browser window, but now it's a tab. So at the moment, if I right-click this website, I would find that the title, well, now in this case, but go to any website and you right-click it, and you'll find that there's always a title tag, Control F, title, and you'll find that the title right here is always what you'll see up here. And every website has a title. So we'll go ahead and get a title, and we won't see that in this console, but that's fine. Let's just say our web page. And if we run it, nothing happens. It's because we need to get some stuff in our body. So let's do a few tags. Let's just say hello as our first tag, and then we have hello, and then we can go ahead and do an H1 tag, which is just a header. This is a header. We'll run that, and then we can change. We can actually have up to 6. So H2 gets a little bit smaller, and H3, H4. So that's just a header tag. Obviously, you might find something like this happening. We have an H1, H2, and then you have these two headers. So that's great. And then so how can we bring in an image? Well, image is this is the image tag, right? And some tags need something called an attribute to actually start doing something. So in this case, an image tag is worthless. If I run it, it's worthless unless I have an attribute. In this case, the attribute is source, and it takes the source of the image. So if I go to any website and I grab a picture, let's just go to Google and grab a picture from there. Let's get a photo of people. All right, and just grab any image, view the image, copy it, copy the image address, go back over here, paste the image source. If I run it, I get that image in my website. Now, what we need to focus on here is that this right here is called an attribute. Now, one of the attributes that you can put in the tag is a style attribute. And what happens with the style attribute is you can style things using a language called CSS. So remember, if you Googled HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you should get an image where they're all combined. It's like they work together. So HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript, they all work together. And using these three together, you can build a website. This is the best way to view it. They all work together to build a website. 3 separate languages, but they all work together. CSS is the styling, JS is the animation, and HTML is the basic code that actually displays the website, right? So let's go back and have a look at an attribute called style, because we want to get through this style tag very quickly. We want to get to something called external styling. So let's go, this is called inline styling because it's in line with the tag. So style, I'm going to go ahead and say color will be red. Okay, and I end it with a semicolon and run it, and now you'll see that the color of this is red. I can go back after the semicolon and I can say, well, I want the font size to be 20 px, 20 pixels, and I run that again, and you see that the font increased. I can go off to google.com/fonts, and I can go get an API font. I don't want to use a font that is going to be just from my system, because if I have a font on my system, so if I go out to, like, let's say Fontbook in my Mac or on your PC, I have all these fonts, and it may be great. I mean, it may look great for I might be able to use them on my website because I have them on my computer. But when you launch your website, a user doesn't have that font, so it looks terrible. So what you want to use is you want to use a font that is online. And so I may go over here and I may just look for a let's say like a Sans font. Let's go with this Open Sans one. It's pretty decent. Just add it, and then let's go ahead and get it in. So we'll go ahead and bring in this link. This will go in our head. This is a link tag. We'll talk about that shortly. And then the CSS for it is font family, Open Sans, and then sans serif. So we'll go back, and I'll put that as our font right after the semicolon. And now watch what happens to that font. It becomes that font that we just used, Open Sans. If I take that same attribute and I put it in my H1 tag, I should get the same thing happening. Okay, and I'll just change this to black, remove the font size, let it do it automatically, and now we should see that this actually updated the font. All right, so the reason I'm showing you all of this is because we want to understand that there's an attribute called style. There's an attribute called source. Another important attribute is, let me just go ahead and erase all of this. Another important attribute is the A tag. Right? That's a link tag. So A by itself does nothing. If you run it, nothing happens. But if you add a href attribute, it can link to a website. So let's go to HTTP. This is where we want to go. So let's go to HTTP www.google.com. And if I run it again, nothing happens. So what's unique about this tag is that between the start and the end tag, you can actually put a link. So I can say click here. And what happens is now it becomes a link. When I click somewhere, it should take me to Google. It should try to go to Google. Now the issue here is that I'm on an online compiler, online IDE. So let's go to target. Let's say target equals underscore blank. And now when I hit that, it should open up a new tab or a new window. Okay, so again, these are just attributes that you need to understand the concept of attributes. As long as you understand that, you're good to go. And we won't go over all the tags because I'm going to assume that either you know HTML or you have heard about it. So at this point it's good to stop here and just go ahead and go over the try to get into CSS quickly so that we can go ahead and start our actual website. So once we have these basic tags down, we can go ahead and look at other tags. So there's a lot of tags. We'll look at more later, and I'll introduce tags like form as we go. Form as we go. But let's go ahead and look at this link tag with external CSS. So inline CSS we saw that we can put a style attribute and we can style in there. And the styling you learn the way that you style it, it comes from CSS. It's CSS code, so you have to learn CSS. So let's go ahead and look at some CSS. First of all, in my head, I can do something called internal styling. So for one-page websites, you can create a style tag. There is a style tag, and in that you can write pure CSS code. So in this case, let's run the page again. I had an H2, and right now it's not styled. So if I go and I start doing some CSS code, I'll say P, and then curly bracket, and I can now, in each line, separated with a semicolon, I can go ahead and start styling this. So I'm going to go ahead and say color, and it's going to try to help me. So color is red, and let's just see if that worked. So any P became red. I can say font size is 20 pixels, semicolon. That's working. I can go ahead and do the font family that we did earlier, but I'll need to bring in my style sheet here. So let's go ahead and bring the style sheet in on the title. And then let's go ahead and bring the font family in. So there's my font family, and that should style that with Open Sans, right? And I can start doing a lot of things. I can do letter spacing. I can say, like, let's say 1 pixel, or 10 pixels. That's a lot of spacing, but you know, I can do that. And you can start really exploring just by putting in a few starting key words. You can actually start to realize that there's a lot of attributes out there, a lot of properties for that to style that element. So we won't go into all of that, but that's basically how this is. You just wrote a new language called CSS, and it works together with HTML to style the HTML. Another important thing about CSS is that you can do something called selectors, and you can select elements. So let's just say I had two p tags, hello and bye. Let me remove this header and this link, just so we can see what's happening with these two p tags. So I have hello and bye. This letter spacing is annoying, so hello and bye. And let's say I want this hello, which is a p paragraph, to be blue and this one to be red. Well, how can I do that? Well, in CSS, you can do something called a selector or something called an ID and class. So let's go ahead and create a ID. An ID is good for targeting one specific element. So in this case, I have a P, and I might say ID equals, let's just call this one blue. And then in this P, I'm going to say ID equals red. And so what happens now is that anytime I can select this ID and give it some styling, or I can select this ID and give it some styling. So let's be the default. Let's say the default should be black. All right, and instead of using black, let's use a hex code called a hex color. And if you want to know what hex colors are, just type in hex colors, and Google should give you a nice overview of it. And basically, black is 6 zeros, and white is all 6 Fs. So, and between those are different colors. You can explore that on your own, but it's better to use these because these are web-safe colors. And so I'm going to go ahead and say black here, and the font size should be 20, and the font will be Open Sans. Great. So now that we have, that's for every P. Okay. And what I want to do now is I want to say P, but I want to target this ID. So to target an ID, you use a hashtag, and you call the ID. In this case, it's blue. And now I can go ahead and give it a different property. So I can say the color of this should be red. Let's do like a red color, or a blue, I'm sorry. Let's just do a blue color. And if I don't know the hex code, I just go ahead and type in blue, and I run it. And now any P that has an ID of blue will become blue. And then copy and paste that. And as you probably have already guessed, you can do red, and you can make that color red. And so those two become blue or red. So this is what you call an ID, and this is what you call a selector. So I'm selecting the ID or the element that I want to style. Another thing, so hopefully IDs make sense now. IDs can be used to style one specific element. Now what happens if I have a section that I want to style? I might want to use something called a class. So let's look how classes work. So first of all, let me go ahead and create an H1 and say blue area, and then let's go create another H1 down here and call this one red area. Okay? Now I'm going to remove the IDs. Okay? And so I have a blue area with hello and a red area with bye, and I'm going to remove this styling right here. So we have a clean slate here. And what I'll do now is I'll go back and I'll look at what I want to do. I want to make this whole area blue and this whole area red. Now this is the question you need to ask yourself. Are we targeting one specific element, or are we targeting multiple elements? The answer is multiple elements. I might have an image in here, I might have an A tag in here. It doesn't matter. I want that whole section, whatever I have, I want it to be in a blue area. So what I'll do is I'll create something called a tag called a div, very popular tag, and the div has an end tag that shows where that div should end. Now by itself, div does nothing, right? Div does nothing. But when you start to give it attributes, then give it an attribute, then it starts to get really interesting. So watch what happens here. So I'm going to go ahead and create, I have two divs. I have this div and this div. Again, nothing happens, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a class. So I'm going to say class equals, we're going to call it blue area. All right? And the div down here, we're going to call this one red area. Okay? No spacing, underscores, nice class name. And then up here, I'm going to create a class. So instead of saying P and all of that stuff, I'm going to go ahead and say dot blue area, And now in this area, I can give this, this class any property that I want. I can say the height should be 400 pixels. Okay, it made it 400 pixels. I can say the background color should be yellow. Okay, I can say the width of this div should be 100 pixels. Okay, I can start you know, putting background images. I can say, okay, well, I want background images in this div, and a little bit different the way you declare background image, but background image URL. Let's go grab that photo of people again. View image. Let's grab that address, copy address, and go back and paste it. And now, if I run that, I should have a background image. All right, and that's not an image on the actual page. That's an image on the background. And the way to prove that is if I took another image and I put it here. Right? It's a totally different image than the image that you're seeing. So you see, that's the background image, and that's the one that came after hello. So don't get confused with that. That's a totally different concept. You have an image styled as the background, and you have an image as an actual HTML element itself. So you can start seeing the potential now with classes, right? And so I might say, okay, well, I want this to be 200 pixels, and then I might apply that same kind of styling to, remember your semicolon, to the red area, right? But I might have a different background. So maybe the red area now, I want to have a totally different background. The background should just be red. Okay, so there we go. We have two different classes. And again, anything that the purpose of a class is to style multiple elements, not just one specific element. So we had an ID and we had a class. Notice how I call it. And those are the basics of CSS. We ran through that very quickly. Now what I'll do now is quickly take this code and get to the point of this whole part of the course, which is to get us to external styling to understand that. So we take the internal contents of styling, remove the style tag, and paste it in an external file called whatever.css. Whatever you want .css, make sure it ends in .css. And let me take the chance to this is probably annoying many of you if you're already a programmer, to tell you that the indentation is not very important as far as you know, functionality. It will still work in HTML and CSS, but aesthetically and even as a programmer, you do not want to have your indentations or your code organized in this way. So I'm going to press Shift and Tab and go all the way back, and then I'm going to nicely indent the areas by pressing Tab that I want to focus on. So that looks good. Now that's clean code. You have your class called, and then you've opened and closed the curly brackets. It's all nicely indented. So when you start coding, you can start on the next line. It can be nice and organized, and you're keeping track of what you're doing here. So remember that indentation is very important for aesthetics. Very quickly, just to go over this, a comment in CSS is just a / and then something here, and then you end it with a asterisk and a /. So this is something that programmers use to talk to other programmers. It's not code that actually runs. Nothing runs here, and it's different in every language. So that's a CSS comment. To do a HTML comment, it's just let's go over here, and let's say angle bracket, exclamation mark, dash dash, and then you end it with dash dash angle bracket. All right, so that's a comment in HTML. Okay, so now let's go ahead and link our CSS. So if I run this page now, we don't have styling. Well, we shouldn't have styling. Let me go ahead and make sure I'm not hooked up to anything. Yep, just really make sure we. Okay, so we said we have all these divs and everything. So let's run it. Let's remove this code. Maybe it's linked already. Good. Okay, so we have no. We have nothing happening, and in the real world, online this is working, but in the real world this would not be hooked up automatically to our web page. So I'm going to go ahead and create a link. Take the chance to create a link to explain the link tag. So the link tag takes an attribute of href, and it takes an attribute of rel, which is a relationship. So in this case, the link rel the relationship that we want to establish is a style sheet relationship. And the link to our style sheet, in this case, is on the same directory. It's index.css. Okay? And now when I put back my my code, I save everything, save everything. When you run your page, it's now taking the styling from this page. And if you were to now to apply this on an external IDE, which we'll do right now, you'll see how this whole thing works. So let's copy and paste this, open up something like Sublime Text, paste it. We've already saved it as .html. Make a new file, and this we'll call style.css. And now in the style tag, in the style sheet, we'll copy and paste it, and we'll put it in there, and then we'll save that as well. And now we look and we try to run our web page. We go over here and we say, okay, open in browser. And we open it, it opens in Safari, and you find that it's not styled. So what happens here, what's happening here is that we need to go ahead and actually hook it up. So it's on the same directory, but it's called style.css. And now when we go back to Safari and we refresh, we should find that this styling actually worked. Okay? And it's getting that photo hot linked from the internet and so on. So this is what you call an external style sheet. And what are the benefits? Well, obviously the benefit is that you can have one style sheet for many HTML pages. The advantage of an internal style sheet, which is when you have the style tag, is that you can, it's good for having one page. You know, if you have a one-page website, you know, just go ahead and why have an external sheet when you can do it right in there. And then, of course, the inline styling is not recommended because you want to keep your body as light as possible. And light means keep the styling out of this, let the styling be done by something else. Keep the JavaScript out of this, let the JavaScript be done from somewhere else. So that's styling. We've covered two languages right now, HTML and CSS, very quickly, but enough to get us onto our website and get things going. So let's go ahead and go back to Python Anywhere. We'll still need these, so I'll keep these kind of available to us. And let's go back to our website and look at what we're doing here. We have our website, Hello from Bottle, but let's go now and look at our files. Go into Files, and let's go to My Site, and let's go to our bottle.py. So as long as this bottle, this is a Python file now, okay? So as long as this Python file is running on our server, our website is launched and ready to go. So instead of saying hello from Bottle, I'm going to say hello from Engage CS. This is coming from our server. I'm going to save it and refresh our website. Go back over here, and if you refresh your website, it says hello from Engage CS. This is coming from our server. So this is actually feeding from a Python file, and we can load an HTML file from here, which I'll explain in a second. But before I actually show you templates and we actually get into this code right here, this bottle code, let's just go ahead and show that we can actually return raw HTML right here. So I'm going to take the code that we created earlier, just the index code, and I'll copy and paste it. I'll copy it, and I'll paste it between 3 parentheses, okay? And I'll save it, and I'll refresh. And if you go back and look at our website now, we actually have HTML code pushed out from our server. And if I right-click, you'll see that I have our title is showing up there. We haven't linked the actual style sheet yet, but this would be linked because it's hot linked. It's coming from the internet. And then we have these divs and the H1s and everything's actually there. So we actually have a working website. And what we need to do now is we need to understand that we cannot use, just like we want to keep our body light, we want to also keep our Python file light. So we do not want to just load out HTML here. So how do we do it? Well, we go back and we explore what we're actually doing here first of all. And then once we understand this part, we can go ahead and start with something called templates. So let's go back and look at the very first part of the code. We did something here called from bottle import default app and route. Now, it's not good to explain what default app and route is at this moment, but what we want to understand, the big idea here is that we've imported something into our code. So if I go to Replit again, and we go out to Python, and we start a new Python one. Now this is just Python, this is not HTML. And I say x is equal to 5 and y is equal to, this is just some quick Python code, and I'll say z is equal to x plus y, and then I'm going to print z. Okay, so z is equal to x plus y, print z, we get 11. Okay, so this is some Python code. we'll get into Python shortly, but just understand what the concept here. This is code that Python understands. Sometimes you can do things with Python, like let's say I want to get the current time. I can't do that unless I import a module. And so in this case, I might import date time, or maybe I want to create a random number, right? I want to create a random number for x. So I can't do that by, Python can't do it on its own. It needs to have a library, and so I'm going to import something called random, or import something called math, and be able to use those libraries. So for example, import random, and it might say random dot, I think it's rand. I think it's rand int, and then you can grab a random integer. So what is this? And I think this is the range, so like 1 to 5. Let's see if that works. Yeah. So it grabbed any random number and from 1 to 5, and it added it to 6, and it printed it out. So the point here, though, is that you need to have a module to do that, and that's called importing. So what we're doing here is we're importing a module, some modules to help us get started with this. And we have a function, which we'll get into when we learn about Python, and we have a return, which is kind of like a print. Think of it now. It's not a print, but think of it as a print for now. It returns something back to the web page, or back to the user, to the program. And our route is something that we need to understand how pages work in our web app. So right now, our default app, or our default route, just like a route in the real world, you can go left or right. It's a route. It's a path you take. We have a path here, and our current path, when we just go to .com, that's the same as going to /. It is this current route. So if I go back over here, and let me just return hello, so we can actually see what's happening with that route. Let's go back, and let's just return hello. Okay, so let me copy and paste, and let me get another route going here, and we'll call this route contact. And instead of saying return hello, I'm going to say this is our contact page. Let me save it, refresh, and now when we go to our route, we get hello, but when we go to contact, we get this is our contact page. You can see what's happening here. We're actually going between, we can go between pages, or what we call routes. I can actually even go in here, put some HTML really quick, and say href. You remember this? This is a tag for to move to a different page. We can say href, and we're going to go ahead and say go to contact, and then click here to go to contact. Close the a tag, and now when we go to our page, we have a link, and it goes to contact. Okay, so you can see what's happening here. These routes are basically pages, and we don't have this extension like dot, like you would see in the old days, .aspx or dot something else. It's just for a web app. You actually are just going to use routes, and then when you learn about templates and parameters, you can start realizing that you can use something called a template, which we'll get into right now, and that with that template, you can load in different information. So when you log into Gmail, for example, Gmail has a template, and then based on the user's login credentials, then it loads different data, what we call parameters, into that template. So that's enough of that. Let's get right into templates. Let's go ahead and get started. So we need to import something called template. So add that to your import. And let's go back out to my site. I'll open this in a new tab, and we want to have a new template. So let's go ahead and call this one home.tpl. All right, so this is our template. I'll create that file, and we're going to take our code from here, and we're going to paste it in our home.tpl. Okay, and just for the sake of saving time, I'm going to actually bring in the CSS too, and we're going to go ahead and use internal styling for now. Now that you understand external styling, let's just go ahead and use internal styling for now. Let me just fix the indentation here so it looks decent. That's not bad. It could be better, right? But for now, we'll keep that there, and then we'll save it, and we'll go and hook up our home.tpl. So go back to your bottle, remove this contact, remove all of this. Just go to return and say return template, and now you specify the template. It's very simple. You simply say, I'm going to go ahead and say home, call the whole URL home, engage CS, slash my site slash, we call it home. There's no need for .tpl. Save, refresh. So when I go to this route, it should return that template that we just set up. So let's save it, refresh. Let's go back to engagecs.python.com, run it, and now it returned our HTML page. This is a template, and you would see it in the rendered version. You would see it as just HTML. Okay, and what's cool about this is that we can actually start passing in parameters. I can start putting in some Python code here, which we'll learn shortly. I can say name equals Victor, and I can actually pass in name, okay, which we'll look at shortly, into my web page, and so I can say welcome name up here, simply by using a TPL and the backend. So this is your backend, and this is kind of acting like your front end. All right, so there we go. There's a basic push of a template out to our website, to our web app, and now we can start getting creative. We can go to our home.tpl, and we can do whatever we want in here. We can put in a link. We can say href contact, and we can say click here to contact me. Okay, and that can just be a simple paragraph. Let's just make that a paragraph. And it's a nested element. It has an A tag in it. Oops. And then we'll say click here to contact. We need to have text, the actual text. So click here to contact me. And if I go back, it should take us out. If we still have our contact page, we don't. But we can go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and get more practice by creating a contact route. So let's go ahead and say contact. And what should we call our template? Let's just call it contact. All right, save it, refresh. What do we need? We need a contact.tpl. So let's take our home.tpl, let's paste it, let's create one called contact.tpl, and let's paste it into our contact.tpl and just remove the title, change the title to contact, remove some styling, we don't need the styling now, and I'm just going to stick a web form in here. So let's go to W3schools Webform. W3schools is a great way to learn HTML, CSS, any language you want. W3schools is a great way to do it. Let's just grab a template from them for the form, and we'll put that in contact. No need to understand this right now. We'll get into this shortly. But put a form in there, remove the action. We don't need the action. We're not using PHP. Save. Okay. Let it save. Refresh. And let's check. So right now our contact route is returning a page called contact, a template called contact, which we have. We saved it. And our home has a link now that says go to contact. And I'll copy and paste this because I'm going to bring it back and use it for the contact page as well. So let's go over here and just say click here to go, and let's go home. So how do we go home? Well, just a slash and just say home. Let's just say home here. And that's it. We have that going back. So now we can go back and forth between the two pages. Let's go ahead and run it. Click here to contact me. There's a contact form. Click here to go home. We're going back and forth, back and forth. All right? And so we have some functionality between those two pages, between those two routes. We're getting a warning here. The warning is just that we're using the same function. So we'll stop in a few minutes anyway and go and look at some Python code, just enough to get us started. Again, we're not going to go deep into anything in this course. It's just a very quick course to get you started up and running, let you explore. And then in part two, we'll leave part one for just the basics, and in part two, I'll go ahead and cover all of the code that we mentioned here, which is understanding more of the imports. So we've imported, error page, request. We've imported some encryption for our database. We've imported some database functionality, and we'll get into all of that. But what will happen is none of this would make sense unless you knew the very basics, and that's what this first part is for. Okay, so we have that basic functionality happening. Again, and just very quickly to cover this in bot, so we may not come back to this specific part, is that a function, defined function, is just a name that you give a function. So if you go back to our Python, I might have, for example, that same thing that we did earlier. We had x equals 5 and x equals 5 and y equals 6, right? And I might want to put that in a function. So I may define something. I'll call it addition, and you open and close a bracket and put a colon, indent the information underneath, and now we have Z as the thing that we want to return, so return Z, and I can actually let me just go ahead and print Z, and I can actually run this function. If I run this, nothing happens. I have to actually go and specifically call this function, so I'll say, listen, I want to run addition, run that for me, and when I run addition, it runs that function, and I can have another function called subtraction. And in this case, it just subtracts it, prints Z. So I can run addition, or I can run subtraction. Okay, and these don't run unless you specifically call them. And so what's happening here is that, let's say I had 2 additions. It's just warning you. It's a big problem here in this context, but over here, it's not a major error, because in the route itself you can have a unique name. I mean, I'm sorry, between the 2 routes you can have the same name. So you may get problems using the same name in other cases, but because this is a different route, it's just warning you that this is using the same name. So you can change this to whatever you want, and it should get rid of that warning for you. Okay, so that's part 1. We'll go ahead and stop there. Go ahead and try to get your basic website up, your basic web app up, and go ahead and explore HTML, explore CSS. Spend 1 or 2 days intensively going over it, getting a web page up the way that you want it to get up. The best way to learn is to get something in your head, and then make that your plan, and then go ahead and work your way to it. Just keep researching using websites like W3schools. Stack Overflow is going to be one of your best resources for getting help with code. Now, you may not actually use this for HTML, but you may start using it for something like CSS, where you start to have problems between 2 things, between your HTML, between your CSS. So people will be very happy to answer your question as long as it's not already asked. So go ahead and use that as a resource, but we'll come back in part 2 and get cracking basically, and really be able to do a lot more things with our web app.